Great. I think we can get started. So today I will talk about cloud application resilience, obviously. And in particular, we'll talk about automated recovery simulations. People just do not do disaster recovery tests or even chaos engineering-oriented tests, even though the requirements from application SLA perspective and also from compliance and regulations perspective, people will have to run these DR tests, but unfortunately they do not. I mean, they're too busy. So we'll go through why the organizations, some of these organizations in particular, depending on the vertical, they don't have time to run these recovery simulations. Maybe it's too complex. So we'll go in terms of what are the topmost reasons why they don't do it, and because of which cloud application resilience is still unachievable to an extent. And in particular, we will also compare with how things used to be in the data center. When you move to the cloud, things are supposed to change. Things with respect to at least increasing the SLA will have to improve as well. So let's go through in detail how things look like, and how Appranix in particular can help you in terms of achieving what you want to achieve with respect to running these simulations automatically. To begin with, we try to highlight with respect to particularly on the cloud application resiliency side, what's happening in the market, how analysts are from a third-party perspective comparing what's available in the market and what's happening in terms of broader segment of where things are going. So I highlight Gartner quite a bit. I highlight Forrester quite a bit. So the latest statement from Gartner is that by 2021, the root cause of 90% of cloud application availability issues will be because organizations fail to use cloud service provider native redundancy capabilities. That's kind of a big statement. I mean, this is, I wouldn't say 90% or 70%, 60%. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, organizations are not taking advantage of the capabilities that are available on the public cloud platforms. As you know, take an example of Zoom. Can you compare a collaboration tool or a video conferencing tool implemented within the data center, and then suddenly from 19 million users in 1 month, and within about like 3 weeks, you get up to 200 million. How do you really do that without really taking care of what's happening in the infrastructure to begin with, in terms of operationally being excellent about it, following cloud provider well-architected frameworks and so on. On the other hand, you should have run through some kind of a testing to make sure that you can withstand that kind of onslaught of usage. What if the system goes down? Have you done the recovery simulations? Have you done enough testing, chaos testing for that matter, depending on where you are with respect to your maturity model on the cloud, as well as the DevOps and site reliability engineering perspective. That's all the newer concepts that are evolving, that have been evolving over a period of time. So when you take even the legacy applications, could be a monolithic application that has been running in your data center for a very long time, and that's being lifted and shifted to the cloud platform for a variety of reasons, including the cost and agility or even security purposes, and also for resiliency purposes. We keep highlighting that organizations not only prioritize in terms of going to the cloud, but also they think the reason for going to the cloud is manifold. It's not just cost. Cost is just one aspect of the reason why organizations want to go to the cloud. Second, Modern applications are being created using containers and Kubernetes in particular, right? The runtime platform or orchestration platform, if you will. And of course, Kubernetes is evolving day by day. And if you think about it, it's a new application level platform, and it blends the infrastructure and automates the infrastructure really, really well. So it takes care of a lot of these problems, operational problems that have been plaguing the infrastructure agility to an extent, and also in terms of providing the resiliency required from the infrastructure perspective. Now, when you think about using these modern platforms, maybe because you want to make it easier for the developers to package their applications in a neutral format. You don't have to use AMI, and it takes so much time to start on the virtual machine. So containers are great. Containers also bring a lot of other issues, and we are not going to solve all other problems associated with these platforms and containers running on Kubernetes, but we take care of one issue, and one issue really, really well, which is about the resiliency. And that resiliency aspect comes from approaching the problem from not from infrastructure perspective, but from an application environment perspective, right? So we pretty much make it easier to take advantage of the cloud platform to begin with, and we also make it easier to a point where it's much easier to think about application resiliency when you have the support. The other aspect that we keep highlighting again and again is a requirement for cyber resilience. That's because there have been a number of cyber disasters. Now, the latest one, I don't know, I think somebody from the hacker community followed Vikings, the popular history channel show called Vikings. And the Ragnar ransomware is very active, and it is so interesting. And it is painful from an organization perspective, right? It hides itself within a virtual machine, right? If it goes to the infrastructure to a point where it can create a virtual machine and hide within a particular virtual machine, can you imagine the damage it can do to your entire application environment? I mean, that's going to be a disaster in waiting if you cannot even detect using the regular tools, and forget about, even paying the ransom. It's about the recovery time and the cost associated with it, just like what Atlanta went through almost like 2 years ago. And, a number of cases that keep popping all over the net because the ransomware attacks are happening more and more, and the cyber resilience is such an important thing. Maybe because, the COVID-19 situation has really appended the idea of obviously the work from home situation. More and more teams are distributed, and it is very difficult to coordinate among the teams. And then suddenly, a curveball appears and it hits you at the wrong time, at the wrong place, and you are affected because you didn't prepare yourself. And we are not alone. Other organizations are not alone. And if you think about it, how frequently does an organization go through a planned or unplanned downtime? And planned downtime is okay. Even planned downtime, to your point, is a bad idea if it is done without proper coordination among team members. And depending on the situation with respect to application, one of our customer went through really bad situation where it is clearly in a planned downtime to update a component of the application, and that component update pretty much brought down the application to its knees. I mean, it was functioning okay, but the performance was so bad that they had to scramble to figure out how to go back to the old deployment, right? Or the recovery of that was so painful. It was done for 19 hours, especially when your business is really, thanks to the lower interest rates, they were going through the mortgage applications really, really fast, but the application comes down. So you are not only losing your revenue, but also losing your reputation at the point in time. So either planned or unplanned downtime is bad, and unplanned is really, really bad. And organizations go through these unplanned downtimes many, many times. You can see the numbers. These are the latest numbers. It was IBM and Forrester were kind enough to kind of highlight these unplanned downtimes. You can see every month, there is a downtime, right? Every week there is a downtime. And that's why Gartner is highlighting that you are responsible for your own resiliency of your applications. The cloud providers are not responsible. Cloud providers give you enough resiliency with respect to infrastructure, enough capabilities so that you can take advantage of that hyperscaled, software-defined infrastructure that's available globally so that you can program that infrastructure to a sufficient point where the resiliency is available to your applications. So even if some of these organizations really use the old legacy backup platforms, they are ready to change because they want to drop the technical debt that have been piling up over decades in their application environments, right? So that's why we say, why bother buying these legacy products with respect to backup or even disaster recovery and so on. And there are many kinds. So we're totally legitimately great products. And I used to work with so many of them before, great products. But unfortunately, when it comes down to the cloud, they all kind of scramble to kind of reformat themselves towards that newer approach, cloud native approach. So you don't have to go through complex self-managed backup and restore infrastructure. You are, as a customer, managing that infrastructure. Why? Second, when you put those backup agents across all your infrastructure, now when you turn on auto scaling, which is the concept that I try to explain in terms of cloud enabling your existing applications when you move to the cloud, is that the first thing you do is you make use of the application load balance or network load balances so that you can scale your application environment at different levels. Network load balances scale your backend application environment components, whereas the front end could be scaled with application load balances appropriately depending on the level, depending on the security, and so on. So when you scale them, what happens with respect to your backing up of that particular VM or multiple VMs that are spread across multiple zones? Now, on top of that, you will have to really think about the congestion that you end up creating, backing up those same type of VMs across your auto-scaled environment, going through your production network. So the same agent that are sucking up your data incrementally are, over the weekend full copies, that agent is pulling the data through the same network as your production network, which means that your production applications are slowing down, right? And you will have to maintain, separate systems. That's again another legacy thing that you bring along with your migration over to the cloud. Or even if you started with a cloud native one, you will have to create all of that yourself. You might start with some kind of a snapshots of your environment, depending on the type of service that you might use. And if you're using RDS, you might initiate the standard backup mechanism that's available for you from the cloud provider. But even then, you don't have control over those snapshots. In that case, how would you recover your environment? So separate backup and recovery system is going to be difficult. All your storage lifecycle management is with you. The cloud provider gives you wonderful capabilities. Luckily, it's all one storage system. You're not dealing with like 15 different storage systems within the 8 different vendors. Those days are luckily over. And now, if you can think about, managing the storage, allocation of storage, the entire model has changed. If that model has changed, the approach that you used to use before for backup storage infrastructure management will have to change as well, right? And then comes the infrastructure as code. The infrastructure as code mechanism is the default mechanism on the cloud for operating the cloud infrastructure appropriately. And that is a well-architected framework approach of operating your cloud infrastructures. If that is the case, if you try to follow the old mechanism of oh, I used to do data center ops for storage separately, network separately, system separately, security separately. That is going to be a painful thing for you if you try to kind of create that infrastructure for your entire environment and deploy it using a typical cloud formation, a deployment manager type of thing, where you give your description, where you specify what you want to achieve from a state perspective, and the desired state will be achieved using cloud provider scale functionality. So you don't have to run those things. Now, the infrastructure as code, how do you marry that with your backup environment? And it's not stopping there. It's about managing your cloud services if you end up using more and more cloud services, right? And then what happens when the ransomware hits? What happens when the natural disaster, unplanned downtime hits? Even the planned downtime, you planned it, you deployed it, you didn't have a clue how that particular component is going to affect your broader application environment, but unfortunately, it does hit at the wrong time, at the wrong place, and then application performance takes a hit. And that's when we ask, when we go to our prospects and customers and say, all right, you had some idea with application, bringing application resiliency for your applications when you were in the data center. And when you come to the cloud, you're using a bunch of more services. In that case, have you really taken care of the entire environment? And how much is that? And this 12% is kind of a magic number, because we went with exact quantity of the services that are being used by the customers, and we looked at what's typical protection mechanism for them, and it came out to be like approximately 12% or less. And that's when we ask, are your cloud applications really protected? And that's a big silence on the other end over the Zoom call, of course, nowadays, right? And that is a problem. That's because you're managing these platforms separately, and then you're toiling with those platforms as a system, so the tools. And those tools are giving you, of course, a lot of manual effort and time consumption, and then nobody knows how many errors you might introduce while achieving these things. And people give up. Literally, they give up. And I have a pretty good, information slide on this one, why they give up. And again, when you look at these types of systems, we are mentioning only 4 of them, and augmenting a lot of those individual systems within those big bullet points. At the end of the day, it's very difficult, right? And then that's when we see, why not replace with a single integrated system that delivers application resilience as a service, which completely protects the entire environment. And you can do a lot of things with it. One of the reasons is the recovery, obviously. And then when it comes down to recovery, you will have to really understand what is involved in that environment itself. The environment is not just a bunch of virtual machines or individual databases and the complexity associated with just that. Right? It's about the entire environment. When you think about entire environment, you can see the complexity of understanding the dependency between the services, the interdependency between those services as well. So if you think about one particular instance, this particular instance is running on one of the zones of AWS region, and then you have the metadata associated with it, the connection points. You can see, many different connection points, as well as the configuration details associated with a single instance. Then, if you throw in the other infrastructure components, like VPC, the route tables, the subnet configurations, and the load balancer on top of that to scale, that 4 different zone deployed application environment, and that's when it occurs to you it is hard. It's hard enough that even if you try to use individual tools to make use of a particular functionality, it becomes really, really hard to achieve the application resilience. So we took a completely different approach to solving this problem. And that led to, from our point of view, and also from a lot of our customer point of view, a different product that's so easy And it is easy to subscribe. Go to the marketplace. I will demonstrate how it actually works. 3 steps. In fact, it is 2 steps because subscription is just 1 step anyway. So once you did, once you're done with it, you're not going to subscribe again and again and again. You simply add the policies and you go ahead and recover. In fact, the third point that we are mentioning for test recoveries is the point of discussion in this particular webinar, right? So we say, the first task is 1 time, so you don't have to do it. Second task is also 1 time, once you specify the policies. But the third one is like, whenever I do the recovery test, I have to go and click this button, and then I have to make sure that the application environment comes up, so that I'm satisfied. I get some kind of a report. And we said, no, why don't we take away that pain as well? So far we have been saying, onboard your applications, protect and recover your applications over a coffee break. And we have done this many, many times over a coffee break. And I actually tried it right in this Starbucks when Starbucks were functioning 2-3 months ago. And I sat there at one of the Starbucks and onboarded an application environment for a customer. And we did that over the Zoom call after the COVID-19 in a Sydney region, and we onboarded in about 12 minutes. Right. So that may not apply to all your larger environment, right? For larger environment, the discovery could take a little bit of time, but in general, you get the picture. If we made it easier for you to even onboard, then you can imagine the approach that we have taken to actually solving the cloud application resilience. And one of the biggest problems in solving the application resilience is not running the recovery tests. People do not even run these tests because, so many reasons. They're very valid reasons. And those reasons are, first of all, lack of time, complexity of the environment, and is expensive, and the lack of skills. If you drill down, you'll see clearly genuine reasons for it. One, teams are busy with their production environment. There's more things to worry about, and there's only 24 hours, right? And then the recovery tests, anything that, even if you outsource them, the recovery resiliency provider in a data center era, a resiliency provider is going to suck up more of your time because they don't know what you have done between 2 recovery tests. And sometimes it is so outdated that, by the time you finish putting down this DR plan, it's already outdated because some kind of a configuration has changed in the infrastructure, the application side. So what is the point of creating these infrastructure plans, DR infrastructure plan? There is no point in doing that because it's too late. And the cost of it, right? Typically, even if you need some, 2 times recovery per year, and you go ahead and sign a contract with service provider, resiliency providers, and then you think that, okay, so now I could potentially run 1 more test, and that 1 more test for your critical application costs $50K, right? Roughly about $50K, depending on one of our customers paying about anywhere between $30 to $50K, depending on the application type, and a number of tests that they require beyond the typical 2 tests per year contracts that they have signed with the resiliency provider. And it doesn't stop there. It's, it goes to a point where you give up because it's just impossible to really run it. And then it becomes a chore, and then it becomes a task. And then, you kind of do it, and then you get a report and send it off to your auditors and then be done with it until an actual disaster really strikes. Then you scramble to put together everything, right? The pandemic situation doesn't have to happen all the time. It happens only once in about 100 years, right? A disaster has happened only once. Some of these businesses do not even come back. And there are multiple stories with respect to why an unplanned downtime like this, would lead to a complete disaster, even though you might think that the business has been running okay. The cloud provider, when did the cloud provider environment has really come down? right? When you run on the east coast of Virginia, if Virginia region goes down, so is like 1,000 other customers. But unfortunately, what's happening is that there could be one small environment out of these thousands and thousands of racks, and that particular set of racks might run out of maybe because of a secondary generator problem, right? This literally happened about 4 or 5 months ago. A small generator, second backup generator failed as well, because of which 5% of Virginia region customers were affected. Unfortunately, they cannot get back even their own EBS volumes. Good luck with that one, right? It doesn't have to happen all the time. But would it cost too much to run this test all the time? Apparently not, right? All you have to do is to use the right tools. The skills shortage is another bigger problem. When you go to the market and look at, AWS certified people to start with. AWS has been there for about 15, close to 12 to 15 years now, depending on how you take it. S3 was introduced back in 2006, 8 timeframe, different varieties, different variations of that. Now, if you're using other cloud platforms, then what happens with respect to your certified people for those platforms? Organizations are going multi-cloud. That's good for them, but for the operations team, it's a nightmare, because now you'll have to really recruit and train and monitor, manage every one of them in 15 different ways. So if you go to Kubernetes, it solves certain problems, but unfortunately, Kubernetes comes with its own problem of managing and upgrading all of that. That is another thing that you have to take, an additional thing that you have to take care. So, a lot of individual teams are practicing all of that, but it's difficult to just add, even though it is one more platform. Lack of skills is a big problem, right? And then if you really think back and look at the application resiliency, it becomes really, really hard. And people shy away for a good reason. We understand it. We totally accept that it is the state of the situation, and that is why we release these kind of capabilities. With Appranix, cloud application resilience simulation is as simple as adding a policy. And if that is one time, Appranix system automatically executes entire environment DR test, gives you a report. You can subscribe for notifications. And guess what? Once you do this, you can run it every day. You can run it every week, every month, every year. Of course, that's going to be an infrastructure cost. But if you compare that with your disaster cost, and of course, we will help you in terms of minimizing that cost as well, right? And that's why we are making it so simple that we don't charge for backup. You're backing up. You're paying to your cloud provider anyway, right? Backups are important, but recoverability is better. More than the recoverability, application resiliency is best, right? So there are operation challenges. We take care of all of that. We give you this nice, simple, application-centric, cloud-native platform that simply works, right? You don't have to do any of that complex work to make sure that you are prepared for either COVID-19 situation while going through all these reopening situations, and any ransomware attacks, unplanned planned downtimes. But the expectation, the key market drivers that have been driving the organizations to move forward to a better world has been happening over a period of time, and that will continue to happen. I hope you are doing the same thing as well. Migrate to the cloud. The expectation has changed. The expectation is that the applications need to be always on, right? On-demand pricing obviously helps, but the expectation is that the SLAs are different. And we say cloud backup should be free. And a number of customers that have gone to this. There are some of them contractually obligated to deliver 15 minutes RP on RTO, right? And larger environments, mission critical applications for their business. 8 tech companies that are supposed to run continuously, even though it's a seasonal variation. So what's happening underneath is that we'll go through the entire demo as well, but it's very simple. Appranix Acts connects with your environment read-only, put the policies to create an application environment time machine. I think it is very self-explanatory. It's a time machine for your application environment where you can pick and choose at what time you want to recover your application for a variety of reasons. And it continuously learns because your application environment will be changing through deployment specs, changing through cloud formation templates, changing through CLI, console, your pipeline, DevOps pipeline if you're a DevOps shop, right? And the number of resources that need to be managed in these environments, right, is increasing day by day. Which means that if you managed X amount of petabyte per storage administrator, or 100, 200, 300, 1,000 VMs, now you're looking at few times of that. So at that scale, how do you really manage to deliver that application resilience? And of course, you will have to really take care of the data infrastructure, not only the compute and other infrastructure that really provides the necessary plumbing for your applications, but now you have to really take care of the data infrastructure. That is the lifeblood of the company where the data is stored. So in that case, life cycle management associated with the data infrastructure is very, very crucial. But just the life cycle management of data alone is not going to deliver your application resilience. And that's where we deliver something unique that you can take advantage of, not only in one region, but also in multiple regions as well. That is possible only on the cloud, because you don't have to worry about creating a second region, second data center, not only just within your own geographic region, but you can completely spread it out. If you're operating in Virginia region or Ohio region, you can go to California or Oregon, right? And even if you decided that, my domain has to be completely isolated from another domain, so that even if Appranix.com is attacked, my data is stored somewhere else in another account that is not affected, in another region completely, maybe a second copy, maybe a third copy. This is only storage copies, so incremental copies, not full. So you capture full once, and everything is incremental afterwards. We fully leverage the cloud provider native capabilities to make sure that you are not incurring any additional costs other than the first copy and the incremental copies, depending on the change rate of your application. How do we bring up the entire application environment? That's the key, right? So let's jump on to a demo directly. This is very simple. All you have to do is go to Google and say AWS Appranix or Google Appranix. It's all straightforward there, and you land on the AWS Marketplace. And there are two versions of it. One is annual subscription. Another one is just pay as you go. So pay as you go. You go and subscribe. I already subscribed, so it's not going to be any helpful for these demo purposes. When you subscribe, you'll be prompted with a simple dialog to enter your email ID, maybe an account name, and please make sure that you enter your email properly. Otherwise, you'll not get an email notification from our system. So once you log into your email, enter the password. You are in. The way to go in is you go in, assuming that's your email ID, then you enter the password, you are in. And I have a bunch of cloud assemblies. I will go and explain what those cloud assemblies are. If there is nothing here, you will be prompted to a cloud connection. The cloud connection is very, very simple, as it's a self-explanatory connection. Simulation connection. Let's name it connection, right? It's a recovery simulation connection. So you can pick Google or AWS, grant role-based access. I'm going to discover the Virginia region, and then I'm going to protect my application in the second region, or maybe another region as well. So I can just add more regions. And if you have data sovereignty issues that one of our customers ran into, you could protect within the same region of AWS as well. And all the services, we continue to add more and more services. Once you can customize your access permissions for Appranix, right? All you have to do is to run the CloudFormation template. This CloudFormation template provides necessary permissions for Appranix to figure out. And that approach, the approach that I'm currently going through is the approach that is recommended. And we went through AWS review so that, security-wise, everything is properly done per AWS well-architected framework perspective. So we went through the baseline review to make sure that enterprises are okay, and none of our enterprise customers has any problem with this approach. And you simply acknowledge and create the stack. That's all you have to do. Creation of the stack is will go through the resources, IAM resources, outputs, and so on. And it is very, very simple in terms of running that. I can see a number of, I keep running these things anyway for multiple reasons. So it will generate protect service role with an ARN, very standard practice. And you cut and paste this, let's wait for the latest one to complete as well. I think that's an easy one to make sure that we get it. And then in the outputs region, you get an ARN. You take that, you simply cut and paste, right? And you connect to the cloud. In this particular case, I'm connecting to an environment that is running in Northern Virginia, bunch of applications, components, the virtual machines here, sorry. And there are a bunch of load balancers running, and all the back-end plumbing, all of that is done. You can see number of load balancers. This particular application is actually using these three load balancer, an internal load balancer, an external application level load balancer, and the network load balancer here. And the listeners are appropriately configured with all kinds of configurations. And the VPC has a bunch of services. You can see another Virginia VPC. You have all the VPCs here, subnets, 14 different subnets, route tables, gateways, you name it. All of that are typical environment configurations that I mentioned here a while ago in terms of how you really create that environment, right? So all of that is great. Now, once you discover that environment, you can see Appranix has discovered about 100 resources, compute. You see the compute here. You will be able to browse through, what's there, what's not, is the right thing, and so on. All you have to do, it's a self-guided thing. Now you simply go and create a cloud assembly. You name the cloud assembly. It's a demo simulation assembly, right? And you simply pick up one of the policies here. And you can make use of a policy template that's already available, or you can pick up a new policy. You can create a new policy template. And we give you an opportunity to kind of go and select these two regions. And all you have to do is to select that particular prod VPC, and you have that environment in that VPC. You go and select all the services that is really required. And that's all there is to it. So once you add these, your assembly is done. You could say, and a VPC as well, depending on the situation. All you are selecting is the topmost component that really represents your application, right? And that application is at this point in time, it's an open EMR production VPC that I mentioned here. I'm not going to finish creating this assembly because I already have created an assembly with this configuration. So I'm not going to run through that. That assembly is here. By the way, and if you stop in between, this is going to be in a draft mode, so you can always come back and finish it. And if you look at that assembly, the resources are that many. So I selected, for example, 8 components that represent my open EMR application, which is an open emergency medical records application. right? And all other resources. So if you think about these resources here, so um, these resources are spread out. In this particular case, I have spun out into 4 different zones. In the practical application that I'm showing is about 3 different zones with a less number of load balancers. I will show you, how that maps up. You can see I have to just select these 4 instances or 5, 6 instances for that application. Everything else will be automatically figured out by Appranix. Then you added your policy, daily policy, weekly policy, and so on. And Appranix automatically creates that timeline. Environment time machine is created. It looks very, very innocent, but if you go into the details, that's when you realize that there's a lot of things underneath, right? All the compute environment, all the data infrastructure is captured and lifecycle is properly managed. You can see the network configurations, the network calculation. So we don't collect any other unnecessary components of that infrastructure, cloud resources, cloud services perspective. Only what is required for that particular assembly. A cloud assembly is an assembly of cloud services. That's simple. Now we make sure that all those cloud environment components, resources, data infrastructure, right, all of them are properly copied over to the recovery region. And you have a copy in the primary region as well. So what we are going to do is to click that button to recover at any point in time. So you can go back in time, for that matter. So you can go back and say that, I want to recover from a week ago. So you have the policies, weekly policies. So I go to May 23rd, right? Or I want to go back maybe a month ago. And if I hope I have a monthly policy here. Unfortunately not. So let's go back to previous weeks. Weekly policies, as long as you have the policy, it automatically lifecycle management wise, it automatically takes care of. So you can go back, but my weekly policy allows only 2 months. So we will pick one of these policies, policy, application, environment, time machine. So I'm just picking one environment at a particular point in time, and I'm going to hit recover. I can recover selected resources, right, within the same region. And I can also say that it's in the same VPC or create new VPC. I can recover the entire assembly as well. And I can map to different zones, right? Or I can pick up another region, California region. Let's pick the difficult use case of bringing the entire thing in another region, entire assembly. And I'm going to say, a simulation recovery webinar test. Oh, it's too many. So I select that particular thing, entire assembly, recover, of course. Now you'll have to type in recover in capital letters, because when you spin this up, even though it innocently looks like a simple button, green button, that's fantastic color and everything, but unfortunately you're going to incur the cost. The cost versus your resiliency conversation, right? But even there, we could, you could pretty much reduce the cost, because you could tell Appranix to use spot instances or preemptible instances when you're running on GCP. And moreover, you can also let the system know that, I ran the test, after 1 hour, clean up everything. It's fantastic, because, I forget, even after the webinar, I used to forget, and the infrastructure used to continuously run. But I'm just running a test case. So in that case, hey, Appranix, take care of this. Please clean up after 1 hour, approximately 1 hour, of course. It's a scheduler basis, so it will go and clean up. All I have to click is that recover button, right? That recovery will bring up all the necessary components. Now think about it. A week ago, I didn't have a clue of what really changed. Right? The environment might have changed with respect to any number of configurations, any different combination permutation of this environment, right? The SRE teams site reliability engineering teams might have introduced all kinds of variations with respect to their own microservice area. But what happens to the entire application environment? They were good. They know exactly what to change for that application component. Or your developer might have deployed something new along with it, might have changed the connection, the firewall that allows the front end of the application to talk to the back end RDS. That might have changed. Or you might have even lost a security group. The funny thing is that even if you lose a security group, it's difficult to figure out what you had, and now you don't know what you had, so your application environment is not going to be up. So where is the resiliency for that application environment? Right? All I clicked is a single button. Everything is being brought up. So let's look at what's happening actually on the console. So if you go to the console, close this one. Let me leave that. I am bringing up an entire application environment in the California region. You can see simulation recovery webinar thing is created. You can see the events are getting fired up, right? All of that. You know, who knew what kind of network occurred at that particular point in time was? Route table configurations, right? And if you look at the resources, there's a ton of resources that I need to worry about. This is a very, very simple application, and eight different VMs. Obviously, 8 different VMs, bottom like 43 different resources, cloud resources, right? And if you look at the template itself, right, and the template is decently complex. It's not too complex. It's not like you have thousands of instances and need to worry about all of that. You can see the type of instances, the dependencies of it, the configurations for every one of them, and you can see how they are individually connected, right? And if you look at every one of them, it's its own sub-definition, and then you have properties, instance IDs. Look, in a very simple environment where auto-scaling is happening, you will have to end up writing or customizing your template. I wouldn't say it's a template. A template gives you a template. Who is going to fill up all the details? Right? Where is your data infrastructure? And what's the life cycle of that data infrastructure? What happened to it? How do we know, right? But from an application resiliency perspective, what we say is that bring up that environment no matter what, using all the resources that, hey, AWS, you have. Because if you are using the same capabilities of AWS that's being used by, pretty much maybe 1 million users now. How many million accounts? My application recovery is complete. All the resources have been brought up, right? I understand. So this is like, so I can click a button and do it, that's all fantastic, but I don't want to do that. I want to actually automate that too. So what I do, the key thing for this particular webinar, you protect using a policy, let Appranix take care of the rest. Why not use the same capability, a similar one, for recovery as well? So you simply specify a recovery policy, and I already have a daily policy. I'm going to run this thing every weekly, test runs. And I say frequency, weekly, monthly, and so on, runs on a Sunday, simulation at 12 a.m., and then bring it up in the California region or the same region and say successful protection only, or you could go for partially protection one, because we are using all the cloud provider native capabilities, and sometimes it might fail depending on various reasons, but Appranix actually tries multiple times. So the bots, the backend will try many, many times. Sometimes it's more resilient than humans. So you save it, your job is done. Right? You can go and edit anytime, change the policies, disable it, and do it many, many times. And I have done it. One of my simulation policies run for another assembly on Google side. So you can go into some of the policies here, simulation policy. Looks like I turned off this policy because they keep bringing up new instances. I'm using preemptible recovery profile, by the way, there. By the way, even if you're done with all of that, you can get notifications, or you go to the reports and see here, you get the recovery reports, and recovery reports give you, yesterday, I ran a recovery, and you can see triggered by system user. System automatically took care of it and brought up all my instances, everything. And you can go back and check out what really happened before. No recoveries at the time, but obviously a bunch of protection happened. So you can see protection report, I think so overall report wise, I can go back in time, right? And look at what really happened. Cloud assemblies, what kind of assemblies were protected, what cloud, protection wise, what all the changes happened here. So all of that in terms of your insights are available right here. Then go back, you can subscribe to your notification, very flexible notification approach. You will get notifications based on the success or failure, and that's all you have to do, right? So now if you think about it, think about this situation, right? Where lack of time, complexity, cost, and lack of skills, right? All of those areas, automation is the key. All we have to add is a single simulation policy to automate the entire application environment recovery. And I don't have to do anything afterwards, by the way. My system will go on delete that environment, clean up as if nothing happened in the California region, and your cost will come down within an hour, right? So hourly cost versus really looking at a reliable environment that gives you peace of mind so that you can sleep, that thinking that your environments are safe from any kinds of planned or unplanned one. Even if something happens, you can bring it up to a point where that an average recovery time is about, this is calculated and updated based on your simulation recovery tests. It will give you exactly what your RTO, approximately, because you have tested it so many times. Every day I'm running a test. So even if I ran into some kind of a capacity issue on the other side of the region, and I would know my recovery time might change depending on whether the capacity for AWS is available or not. Cloud, by the way, is not infinite. So you will have to make sure that the capacity is available on the West Coast. And your RPO. And sometimes, you can also make decisions based on your cost. So you can say, for me to protect an environment, entire environment of this many resources in this particular case, I have to decide, depending on the change rate of 10% or 20% and so on. We have a very small environment. It's not $8. It's not a big deal. For me to make sure that my open EMR running on the Google Cloud, $8 versus a peace of mind versus a real ability to bring back that application to satisfy my SLA is nothing. Especially when I can simply tell Appranix to make sure that it's simply automated. So let me stop here and see if there are questions. So please raise your hand, type in any way you like. I think Mike can also coordinate if you're typing in the questions. And we are available for later on if you want to contact us. Mike Rothstein handles all the customer interactions. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And you can also reach out through support.appranix.com as well. Okay. Any questions? Fantastic. Oh, VPC set 2 available into the corporate email. Yep. Already have VPC set up 2 availabilities on there. How does the recovery model works here? No problem. If you are, if you have different zones, no issues. That zone will be automatically replicated to the other side. And if you have like if you're using 6 zones on the Virginia side, and if you're moving to California where you have only 4 zones, or Oregon only 3 zones, Appranix will automatically figure out based on your ALB configurations that there is only 3 zones, so we collapse everything over to 3 zones, right? And make sure that the application comes up, and after that you can adjust it. Okay. All right. So really appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining. And this webinar will be recorded and posted, so you can always go back and refer as well. So thank you very much. Have a great day.